plant a 10,000 square foot garden each year, trying to cut down our cost of food as well as grow the healthiest plants we can. To grow nice and healthy crops, you need good soil. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming making sure our soil is providing all the nutrition that our plants need. Agriculture has relied on the use of natural fertilizers that increase the nutritional value of the soil for most of human history. Synthetic fertilizers made an entrance at the end of the 19th century and have paved the way for modern agriculture production. Now, synthetic fertilizers definitely do have some pros. They provide a consistent amount of precise nutrition to the soil and allow that soil to uptake that immediately. They also tend to be a little bit more cost efficient on a larger scale, and they often can be applied quickly across larger areas. So synthetic fertilizers also do have a lot of negatives that come along with them. They're a man-made product, they have a lot of fillers. The more you apply them to your soil, the more it changes the structure of your soil, not allowing it to hold moisture as well as nutrition. It also has a lot of salts in them, not creating an ideal environment for all that micronutrients. Kind of like how you can survive off a can of soda if you really wanted to, but really, are you firing off all cylinders? Same goes with synthetic fertilizers. They provide the basics, the N, P, and K, the basic essentials for those plants to grow, but really not all the additional things that are really beneficial to it. So it's something that we very much have tried to avoid using. We've tried a lot of different methods such as composting, back to Eden garden methods, rotating our animals through our gardens, trying to give back to our soil. And then with our additional chicken coop build this last year with the Justin Rhodes mobile chicken coop, I thought I would do a little experiment and just see what kind of effects that the chickens would have on the garden soil sitting in there for just 2 weeks. This spring we made a few little minor adjustments to the mobile chicken coop and then moved it out into the garden. I took a soil sample reading at 5 different locations throughout that penned-in area. I put markers down so I knew exact location. Since the mobile chicken coop has a screened bottom where all the manure can fall right through, I didn't want everything to fall in the same place. So every day I would go out there, move that mobile chicken coop around a little bit, and then after the 2 weeks was up, I went out and took another soil sample reading. I took the 2 different soil samples into our local co-op to have sent off to a professional lab to get our results back. I specifically requested to have a nitrogen reading. Soil samples?
Oh, yeah.
How many do you have?
I have 2. And I'd like to do like the nitrogen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
We'll just call after the results.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how long that takes?
Been about a week and a half as of now.
Okay. You guys sending a lot out right now?
Yeah, it's they get pretty backed up this time of year, so.
So after I had submitted my soil samples, I got talking with them a little bit. I was trying to get an idea on just how people were feeling so far this year, especially with the tariffs going on between here and China, soybean being at a really low price, and then the really cold and wet spring that we've had so far this year just really has not been a very good growing season right off the start, and really hasn't improved all that much since then. So after I kind of got chatting with them a little bit and I walked out the door, I started thinking I probably had distracted them a little bit. Especially since they by default don't check for nitrogen, just because the soil is pretty sandy here. It doesn't hold nitrogen all that well, so it's something they usually don't test by default. So the following day I got on the phone, I called them up and I said, hey, do you guys have me down for a nitrogen test? They said they must have forgot to put that on there. I'll get that added on. Well, it also was a very busy time of year when I had dropped this off, and once I finally got my results back, which took way longer than expected, there was no nitrogen information on there. So I guess you could say I was a little frustrated. I probably won't be going back there to have my soil samples done. I'll probably just send them directly off the lab so I know exactly what's going to happen, because I know this lab is a very good lab. We've worked with them quite a bit in the past. So where I think the real meat and the potatoes are is the nitrogen with chicken manure, but unfortunately that's not going to be on the results. But we can look at a couple additional things here. So taking a look at our soil sample test here, we got 2 different rows here. We got the AFC and BFC. Sample A is before the chickens went into the garden, and sample B is the soil after the chickens have been in the garden for 2 weeks. If we take a look at the third column, top row here, you can see our organic matter went from 5.4 to 5.9. You also notice on the right side it's got the VH, which stands for very high, and you'll see that in a couple other columns. You see like VH or H standing for high. So we made some pretty good improvements. Organic matter is really plant and animal material that's in the soil. A lot of times the color of your soil will greatly reflect the amount of organic material in there. Usually the darker the soil, the more organic material that's in there. And the organic matter serves as a reservoir for essential nutrients, especially nitrogen. So during the growing season, a part of that reservoir nitrogen is made available to the plants as bacteria breaks that down. Or synthetic fertilizers will make that stuff readily available right off the start. There are some positives to that as well, because it's kind of like a slow time release type thing. But of course, getting your organic material up will definitely do good things to your soil and your plants. Next thing we'll look at is actually the phosphorus. Those all went up as well. You notice those are all marked as very high. And phosphorus is basically, it can takes the nutrients and kind of uses it building blocks to build that plant. A couple signs that your phosphorus might be a little low in your garden is you might have smaller plants, not a lot of flowers. Maybe you get a little bit of a lighter green tint to your plants. Sometimes that's just a low nitrogen reflection, but then also you kind of might potentially get a little bit of a purplish cast color to your plants as well. So obviously the best way to determine whether you're low on something like that is to get a soil sample, but just those a couple things to look out for. Then if we look at our potassium, magnesium, and calcium, those all went up quite a bit. They're all marked as very high or high. I was amazed actually how much the potassium had gone up in that short period of time. I was going to add some wood ash to the garden, generally do every spring and kind of throughout the winter. Matter of fact, I did add a little bit this winter, but obviously that wouldn't have affected this. I had applied that quite a bit before while there was still snow on the ground. But a lot of times I'll do that because wood ash will have 5 to 7% potassium. I was really impressed the improvements on just 2 weeks the chickens had, and I was really amazed actually how much potassium had gone up into the garden there. I look at the pH level here. We went from 7.3 to 7.3, so that basically stayed the same, which I was actually surprised because a lot of times you hear chicken manure being pretty acidic, but with them only being in there for 2 weeks, it didn't seem to have too big of an impact there. The next column, you'll see something that says Caution Exchange Capacity, CEC. First time I ever saw this, I was a little confused by it, or I didn't really quite understand what that meant, but it's kind of another way to measure a little bit of organic material in there. Basically, the soil's ability to hold nutrition such as potassium, magnesium, calcium, as well as other positively charged ions such as sodium and hydrogen. And the CEC of the soil is dependent upon the amounts and types of material that's in your garden. So if you have a lot of clay, sand, that can greatly vary or change your CEC levels. It will vary from anywhere from 5 to 35 depending upon the soil type. Soil with higher CEC would generally have higher levels of clay and organic material. For example, one would expect soil with silty clay loam texture to have a considerably higher CEC than a sandy loam soil. Although high CEC soils can hold more nutrients, good soil management is required if these soils are to be more productive. Then we look at these last little chunks here. We got the potassium, magnesium, and calcium, and this is all based off that CEC number, and I think that it has to do with how those are available to the plants. A lot of times the potassium level is somewhere between 2 and 5, so in our case we were already pretty high at 6.2 and went up to 7.3, so we were really high on that range. Magnesium is generally somewhere in the 12 to 18%, and we're at 17.3. We actually went down a point. 1% there. And then our calcium, generally somewhere between 65 and 75. And we're at 76, and those all kind of stayed the same. So we're at very high levels for that and what's available to the plant. So very good looking things here. Just to throw one more little wrench in the mix here, I do have a soil sample test from back in 2016, sent up the exact same labs. It was from the same garden. We have two gardens basically. We have a smaller one and we have a larger one. And the larger one we tend to like rotate animals in a lot more. Like we had pigs that we kind of move around each year. their pig pen, because we generally would grow heavier crops in there, such as corn. In the smaller garden, we've done a lot of back to Eden type stuff. We've done wood chips, but we've really struggled finding some of those, and we've kind of resulted to just using cardboard and hay and just mulching that stuff into the garden at the end of the year. Kind of does two things. It adds organic material back into the soil, as well as it sort of acts as a weed barrier, so just less work for us in the summertime. And looking at our 2016 results, I can see that our organic matter was at 2.5, pretty low, or it's got an L next to it for low. And then before the chickens got into place, we went to 5.4, so we've been definitely doing some things right here. And then the chickens brought that up to 5.9 after those 2 weeks. So that's really looking good. Our phosphorus has all jumped up. Our potassium, magnesium, calcium, those were all already pretty high, and those went up even higher. One thing I do notice is our pH has changed a little bit. We've actually gone to a little bit more alkaline soil. Usually 7 is kind of middle of the road. Anything lower than that, you start getting a little more acidic soil, and you go up higher, you kind of become more alkaline. It looks like we went from 7 to 7.3, so we're kind of heading that direction, something we might want to keep an eye on. Also, if we look at our CEC number, we went from a 9.3 to 12.3 before the chickens got into place, and then 14.5. So a pretty big jump. Man, those chickens had a good impact. I'm really excited about the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, significant improvements of the soil, and really impressed on the impact that the chickens had in just that short little window of 2 weeks. I do want to give a little precaution. Ideally, you want to compost manure, especially chicken manure. A lot of times it's very high in nitrogen, and want to let that kind of break and settle down a little bit, especially around crops that tend to be a little bit more sensitive to nitrogen. You run the risk of burning that crop. We've used it around corn. It's worked out really well, but that's also something that's up and away from that soil. Or if you have fruits and vegetables that might potentially come in contact with that soil, such as strawberries or something that's hanging down really low, you run the risk of that potentially picking up something. So you might want to explore some different organic fertilizer methods around something like that. But really quite pleased. It's kind of interesting, when I went to go shoot a little B-roll of some of the fertilizers that were available in the store, I was pretty impressed on the number of organic options that are starting to become more available. They tend to be a little bit more expensive than synthetic fertilizers, but definitely seeing a lot more of them showing up. We've definitely used Joe's before around our tomatoes, but sometimes it's a little hard to apply on a larger scale on the size of garden that we have. There is the saying that you pay for it one way or the other, whether you're shopping out of the center of the grocery store, eating a lot of cheap processed food, you end up paying for it down the road in your health as well as in doctor bills. So sometimes it's a little bit of a hard balance. It's something we're always trying to strive for, have a nice, cheap, and very nutritious type garden. And I think organic method is definitely the way to go for something like that. A lot of times organic fertilizers tend to be a little bit more labor intensive, which sometimes is a good thing too. It's, you know, you're getting your physical activity and exercise in that process. And in the long run, I think it's much better, both for yourself. You eat a lot more nutritious plants, as well as the soil. It's just a lot more of a sustainable option, and things just continue to improve over time. So fortunately, we didn't have a nitrogen reading. I think that would have gave us a much better idea on what was going on, especially since chicken manure is pretty well known for a very high nitrogen level. But lesson learned here. Next time we run this experiment, we're just going to bypass the middleman, and we're just going to send things off directly to the lab and see how things go. I'm definitely going to run this experiment again, and just wanted to kind of share what I've learned so far in this process. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.